Hi all, and a warm welcome to all of you on this special day where we will be covering the most demanding skill in the industry in CSS, which is the CSS Grid part. So I have already done my setup ready. We'll wait for some time for 1 to 2 people, 1 to 2 minutes. Then we will start with the CSS Grid. So setup is almost ready by now. And one more thing, today we will be going to a session in Firefox Developer Edition. So 1 second. So here we will be checking the output. Okay, so that is fine. Okay, so the setup is ready. Let us wait for another 1 to 2 minutes, then we will start the session. So today we will be doing the CSS grid part, and in this CSS grid part, we will be, I can say, we will be covering the entire grid, and depending upon the time, if we have some time left, we will have we have a very small project also that we will share, and we will do it right here, right now. So it all depends on the time. And in grid is actually, I can say, a display property in CSS where it works in both the direction. That means in rows and columns, it works in both direction. The limitation of Flexbox is Flexbox works only in one direction. So okay, so let us start and don't wait time now. Okay, so grid. What is a grid? Grid is basically a display property in CSS which helps to make the web page responsive. Okay, the purpose of grid is to make the web page responsive, and it is being used a lot these days. So with the help of grid, the use of media queries will be, I can say, very less, or I can say it's no use of media queries sometimes, because automatically depending upon the size of the content, or sorry, depending on the size of the screen, it automatically adjusts the content. So that is why the grid is being used a lot. And grid comes into existence in 2015 only, when a major upgrade has been happened in the mobile industry. So the Flexbox and grid comes into existence in 2015. Okay. So okay, so the structure is already here. A simple grid folder I've created, and I've created a index.html and a style.css. Nothing special I've created, and a link tag I've added. Okay, so now what I do, let us have 1 second. So let me have the setup. Okay, so this is the setup where I have a parent class container, and in this parent class container, we have items from 1 to 10, and all these items have a common class. Okay, so after that, let me have a control shift P, format selection, and everything will get selected. Now after this thing, if you have noticed one thing here, okay, so if you have noticed one thing here, this is basically the items 1 to 10, and we have some basic styling, some linear gradient styling we have added actually here to make the page beautiful, and a variable property here for adding the colors. So this is how the structure looks like. Now after this thing, what we do, let us apply the display of grid. So for this parent container, we will be applying the display of grid, and here let me have dot pg, display of grids. But here, as soon as we apply display grid, nothing will happen. Why nothing will happen? Because, as I've told you, grid divides whole of the page into rows and columns. Okay. Grid divide whole of the page into rows and columns. So we need to declare rows and column also. That is why grid is somewhat a little bit typical also and somewhat little bit different also. Second. Okay. So now after this thing, let us declare how many rows and how many columns we are looking for. So what we do, we have GTC grid template columns, and let us have two columns. So 200 px of first column and 500 px of another column. So if you see, two columns have created. First one is of 200 px, this is of 200 px, and another one is of 500 px. Fine. So that is how we have created two columns. Now let us create rows also and see how it fits. We have GTR grid template rows. So we have 200 px of first row, another let's say 100 px, and the last of 300 px. So here, if you see, we have two columns and three rows. Okay, we have two columns and three rows. Now, in this two column and three row, we have 10 items to fit, but practically it's not possible for to fit 10 items here. So what is happening here? If you see what is happening here, we have four items left additionally here. So for these four items to fit, okay, what we need to do, we need to use another property which will help these four items to give some space. Okay, but currently what is happening, depending upon the size of the content of this item, the space has been allotted to them through the grid system. So that is how this grid system will work like. After this thing, let us have a property which is called as GG grid gap of let's say 10p x. Now 10px grid gap. If you see grid gap, the name represents gap, so it created a gap between the items. So the gap size is of 10px. Now after this thing, let us have the next property. Okay, before going further, let us see the next thing in grid, which is called as the rows implicit and explicit tracks. So for this thing, let us have the view of okay. So now there are two type of tracks in the entire system. So okay, the explicit and the implicit. So the explicit tracks are the tracks. Okay, explicit tracks are, you can say explicit tracks here. These dash, these tracks identified by dash are the explicit tracks. These are the explicit tracks. Okay, the tracks which are identified by the dash lines are the explicit tracks, and the track which are identified by the dots, here you can see the dots, are the implicit tracks. Okay, now explicit, implicit. Now in this explicit and implicit track, if you see, and the explicit and implicit track, if you see, uh, the explicit track means the tracks are created by the dash lines are created because we have created grid template rows and grid template columns. Okay. Now, second one, the implicit tracks are created by because it has been created internally by the grid system. So that is how this thing will work. Like. Now you can read the columns also 1, 2, like that. If you go in the reverse manner, so it will be -1, it will be -2. If in the row part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you go in the reverse pattern, so -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So this in this way you can count the rows and columns. Fine. Now after this thing, let us have a property which is called as the grid auto row. Grid auto rows, and if I give grid auto row to 150 px now this grid auto row to 150 px means for the items left after the 1 2 3 4 5 6, this 150 px will be given to the items left over after the grid system, which is the 7 8 9 and 10. So the space you see here, this space is 150 px, and it is being given to the grid system. Now after this thing, let me reduce the item. Okay, now one thing. Okay, so for one thing, what we do here, and we have a plain grid template column property. So we have a plain grid template column property, display of a grid, and a grid gap of 10 px. Now what we do here, now suppose, one second. Now suppose if I add any new item, by default, it will gets added below item number 3. Below item number 1. Why it is like that? Because we have declared rows and columns. Fine. Now, if I want to create an item by the side of item number 2, so for this thing, we have a property which is called as the grid auto flow. So what I do, grid auto flow, by default it is row only, but if I change this to grid auto flow column, okay, so the next item which will gets created in a column pattern and in a same line. So that is how you can use this thing. Here, if you see, we have only 2 columns, but here another column we get created with the help of grid auto flow. So that is the beauty of grid auto flow. Now, after this thing, let us see the next thing here. And the next thing what we will see is the sizing of tracks, sizing tracks in CSS. So what are the sizing of tracks in CSS and how we will be managing it? So for this purpose, so let me do one thing. One second, let me have a change in the structure. Okay, so this is the structure what we are looking for, but here already we have given grid out of a column. What is happening here? All the items will get created. Okay, fine. So now, if you see, we have plain display of grid and a grid cap of 10 px. So we have the items in a block pattern. Okay. Now what we are doing, let us see the next thing with, okay. So let us create GTC grid template column in a pattern of percentage. So we have 25%. Okay, so here, if you see, we have, and one second, let me increase this to 20 px. Okay. So now, if you see one thing, we have created 4 columns. Okay. The size of each column will be 25%. Right? And a grid gap of 20 px we have created. Fine. Now, what is happening here? 25% into 4 is 100% plus gap of 20 px. So that means 120 px or 120% will be the total space allotted. Now, after this thing, if you have noticed one thing, the last of the column, the last column sticks. See, the last column sticks to the end of the screen or the end of the bar. Why this is happening? Because of the screen size is 100% and we have calculated the screen size to 120% or 120p. Fine. So in order to overcome, okay, so let me do one thing. Let me change the 200px and 150px again. And what I do here, it is introduced a new unit which is called as the FR. FR is the free space left after the explicit bit. So you can simply remember as the free space. Now, here, if you see, we have created three columns. So one column of 200px, 200px, 150px, and 1fr. Now, in these three columns, if you see, if you see here, okay, 200px is our first column, 150px is our second column, and 1fr is of last column. But here, if you see one thing, which is very important, that the leftover free space, okay, entirely is being used by the last column. Now, if I another have a column of 2fr, 2fr, so you can see 200px, 150px, 1fr, and 2fr. That means twice of the free space has been utilized by the last column. One part of the free space has been utilized by the third column, and the column number 1 and column number 2 are 200px and 150px. So that is how you can calculate this thing. Now, after this 1fr and 2fr, let us have a auto functionality. So how this auto functionality will work? Now, in this auto functionality, it is very simple that depending on the size of the content, the space has been allotted. So if the content is small, less space is there. Now, if I increase the content, more space is available. Okay, so that is how this thing will work. Auto means automatically, like you can say. So automatically it adjusts the space, it allows the space to them. Now, after this thing, let us have a repeat functionality. So the repeat along with auto, repeat 2 times of 1. Now, how we read this? So first is of auto, second is of repeat 2 times of 1fr. So 1fr, then 150px, then 1fr, and 2fr. So that is how you can correlate or you can link this thing. If I say once again, auto repeat 2 times of 1fr, so 1fr, 1fr, 150px, 1fr, 1fr, and 2fr. So that is how this thing can be read out. Okay. Now after this thing, if I use after this thing, if I use, okay, so now let us see the next thing, which is called as the sizing of grid items. Okay, sizing of grid items. So how the sizing of grid items can be done? Now for this thing, one second. One second. Needs to change the structure here. Okay, so currently what we are doing, we have a common class and we have a separate class. We will be using two classes now. And all these common class and separate class have been given till item number 30. Fine. So now let us see one thing. So what I do here for this thing, we will be using the common class, which is a container, and we have the plot container and display of a grid and a grid gap of 20 px with grid template column. Now, simple what I do here, I want 5 columns of FR. 5 columns of 1FR. Very simple, we have created. Now what I do here, let me target the item number 9. Okay, so for this item number 9, we will be using this class. We will change the background color to white. Okay, so that you can easily identify what is happening in this particular cell. Now let us change the width to 500 px. So what is happening here? We have actually increased the width of item number 9. Okay, but what is happening? It is disturbing the entire column. So that is how this thing is happening. But what we want only the item number 9 to be like this, but and rest of the column will remain in the particular fashion. So for this thing, what we do, we have functionality which is called as a span functionality. Okay, and we will be using this span functionality in the grid column. So we use GC grid column which is span of 2. Okay, now what is happening? Twice of the space has been allotted to the item number 9 without disturbing the whole of the column structure. So that is how this thing will work like. Okay. So here what has happened? The entire structure will remain like that. Okay. Now when no. Okay. So now let us have one more thing here. So if I want this thing in the row pattern, so GR grid row with a span of let's say 2. So you can see in the row pattern also, this row pattern also, we have a span of 2. That means 2 columns and 2 rows will get merged together and we get somewhat this kind of a pattern. Okay. So now there are some shortcuts which we need to see. So if I use grid column start, I want this to start from column number 2 and I want this to end grid column n. It starts from column number 2, 1, 2 start, 3, 4, 5 end. Similarly, I want this to start from grid row start to grid row end. So let's suppose it's a 6. See, it starts from item number 2, column number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It ends. So that is how this thing will work like that. Okay. So now after this thing, there is also one shortcut. So if I want to have, grid of column, I want this to start from 2 and at 6. Simple. Grid row 1, 2, 7. I can have this thing also. This span functionality, this merging functionality is very good. You can see how you will be able to place the items very well. Now, one more thing. So if I write from -2, right? And if I write minus, let us see how it looks like. Okay, so that is how this thing will work like that. After this thing, let me introduce the mixing in grid, which is called as the autofill and autofit properties. Okay. Now, what are autofill and autofit? So, autofill and autofit property are, I can say, almost very similar. Okay, autofill and autofit properties are almost very similar. And let us have the definition first. So, autofill. So, autofill property is being used with repeat function. Okay, autofill property is being used with repeat function, and it is used by the grid to fit as many as possible items in the same row. Okay, so it tries to fit as many as possible items in the same row. So that is how this thing will work. So for this thing to understand, let me have the structural changes here. We have a structure like that, and let me remove this thing. Okay. So now what is happening here? What is happening here? We have our items here, and the definition is it tries to fit as many as possible items in the same row. So let me add the autofill property. Okay, so let us see how it works. For this thing, what I do here, let me have a border also. Border of, let's say, 10. Let me have 5 feet. Next, so let me black color. And here I have grid template column with repeat 5 times of 1 FR. And in this repeat, what I should do, autofill with 150 pixels. Now see the magic. See, it is automatically tried to fit as many as possible items in the same row. See, without moving on to the next row. So automatically it adjusting the content within the box, and you can see the height and width of the box is also changing. Is why it is being called as responsive. Okay, so now after this thing, so after this thing, let me have the next thing, which is called as the auto fit. Now, auto fit property is almost very similar to autofill. And in order to understand the difference between autofill and autofit, let me have a change in the structure. Let us have only 4 items by now. So what I do here, I have auto fit here, and with the 150 px. Now, for the last column, okay, for the item number 4, this item 4, what I should do, got item 4, and I use build column and 2 minus 1. And again, what I do here, I change this to autofill. So here, if you see, This thing is very helpful for you to prepare the menu kind of a thing where you have the left, you can have home product services, and in the right, you can have I can say the feedback, the contact as type of a thing. So this you can create very thing popular. Now, the next thing which we are looking after in CSS is the min-max. Now, what is min-max? So min-max. Min-max is again a very powerful thing which you can use if with the help of I can say autofill, autofit, or auto. It becomes very powerful and it almost reduces the use of media queries. Okay, so let us see how. So here, what I should do. So 1 second. Let me change the structure. We have 4 items here, and in this 4 item, okay, max. Min max container, and we have a display of a grid cap of 20 px, a border property here we have, and a grid template column with autofill of, let me change it to 100 px. Okay, so this is the feature. Now, if you see what is happening here, this item number second, which is a good item, is not getting inside the space alert. So what we do, we will use a feature which is called as the min max feature. Min max with 150px and 1fr. So what is happening here? We have used two type of spaces. So 150px and 1fr. Okay. So now what is happening here? Two type of spaces we have used. 1 second. So here currently we have two type of spaces. So if you see here, now what is happening here? We have two type of spaces here. In this two type of spaces, if you see these type of spaces, what is happening? We have given two types of, so 150px or 150. So depending upon the size, it can pick up anything. So that is also a very important feature and very good feature where you can have two type of space options available with the content. All as soon as you give display of a grid, the site, or I can say the page, will automatically becomes responsive. Now let me hold the session for a minute, and here I would like to share the attendance form. So 1 second. 1 second, let me share you the attendance of today. Second. I have this is the day 4 attendance, which is there on your screen. So you can can this is the day 4 attendance, which is shared in front of your screen. So I request you all to please fill it right here, right now. While the meantime, I just hold the session for 1 to 2 minutes. So once you filled it, please reply with yes so that I can continue the session. So I hope if someone have filled, please reply with yes or no in the comment section so that I'm assured. So if someone filled it, please reply with yes in the comment section so that I can go ahead. I hope you have filled by now because it is not a very, I can say, logical thing. So let me go back and here. Okay. So what I should do? Okay. So let us check out the next topic in CSS Grid, which is the grid areas. Okay. So with the help of grid areas, we will I can say grid template area, we will be able to place the items in a very beautiful manner. So let us check out how we will be using that. So the structure. This is the structure what we are going to build it. And in this structure is very simple, which himself tells that I am the sidebar 1, I am the sidebar 2, and I am the center content, and I am the footer. Okay, so let us check out this thing. So we have again we use a display of grid. It will not do anything. After that, we have a grid gap of, let's say, 20px. And after that, we will declare GTC grid template column of one FR, one FR, and one FR, because we have created, and we declare GTR gridded template rows 150p X and one. Okay. So what we did, we have declared 3 columns and 3 rows. So one FR, one FR, one FR, and let me change this to 10 FR. So we have structure like that. So we have 3 columns and 3 rows. Now what we do, we will declare the structure what we are going to prepare. So very simple, the structure will be like that, where we have the sidebar 1, the content, the sidebar 2, the sidebar 1, the content, the sidebar 2, and a footer, and a footer. Now let us experience this in Firefox. So we're predicting that how we will be using this. Now this himself tells that where which content needs to be placed. So let us start placing the items here. So what we do here, dot footer, we have the grid area as first. Now after footer we have dot item 1, we have the grid area as bar 1. Similarly, we have this thing for item 3, and we have this thing for sidebar 2. Okay, so now let us check out for item 2 dot IT2, and we have for grid area for and which. So this is a structure of what we are looking to prepare with the help of grid template area. So this is again a very powerful thing which we can have it. Now after this thing, what we see, we have our we have a layout left. We have a legendary masonry layout which is left here. So let us design that particular layout. So what I should do here? Okay, so let me comment out this thing, and after that, let us have a div 70 items, and for this We have a div with 70 items. Fine. Now let us dot after disturb grid. We have a grid gap of dpx. Okay. Now we declare we want some columns. So what we do, we have gtc grid template columns which repeat 10 times of one fr. So we have 10 times of one fr, but why it is not taking here? Hey, so we have 10 times of one fr. Now after this thing, let me add some irregularities here. So let me add some irregularities here. And here, if you see these irregularities, if you see, okay, what these irregularities are doing currently. So these things have actually created some space between the structure. So what we do, we have a property which is called as the grid auto flow dense. Now see what this property is doing currently. So this property, see here, all the items will get placed properly. Okay, but the sequence, if you count the sequence is not guaranteed. Okay, so here if you count 1 2 3 4 5 6, where is 6? 6 is below 1 to 5. So here, if you want to use this particular property, autoflow dense, you need to be very cautious where you can use this thing, but you need to maintain the sequence also. So this sequence will not be guaranteed here. This you need to check before going further. Now after this thing, let us see the next topic in CSS, which is called as the alignment and centering. Okay. So for this alignment and centering, what we are doing, we are again checking the same thing what we have learned in Flexbox. This is justify item, align item, justify content, align content, justify self, and align self. So that is the thing what we are now looking after. Okay. Now justify works on row axis. Okay. Align work on column axis. So this is the difference, and on the same pattern we are working. We will see the next thing. Now here, let me have the structure. I again. Should I do? This is the structure. So what we have around 40 items with a common class ITM and a separate class. Okay. So that is how this thing will look. And here, let me apply this thing here. So we have a display of a grid. Okay, so it works like that. Now what I do here for this particular item, okay, for this particular item, ITM, change the background to white. Okay, the background to white. Now let us start with the property which is called as a justify content to start. Okay, justify content start. After this thing, we have justify content. and 1 second, ITM. Okay. Display of a grid they will be 10 times of one. I got justify content start on. Okay. So this thing also we need to comment out. Okay. Art and enter 1 second. It is not moving. Display of grid gap of 20 px. 1 second. Okay, so start and center and spread. So these are the 4 values of justify item. So start and center and spread. So after justify item, we will see the next thing, which is called as the align item. So for the align item, let me add the GTR grid template rows with repeat 5 times of 100 p. Okay, so we have display of a grid gap of 20 px, grid template column with repeat 10 times of 1 fr, grid template rows, repeat 5 times of 100 px, and justify item we have the scratch pattern. So and here what should I do? Let us start with the AI align item. Now the movement will be in a different direction. So align item start and enter, and if I use justify item also center, things will be in a perfect center. And after align item start and center, the last property of align item will be the stretch. So let me apply the thing. And if I use align justify item also stretch, so see how beautifully it looks like that. That is how you can use this thing. Now, after justify item and align item, let us see the next thing, which is called as a justify content. So how justify content will work? So for the justify content, we have the set of values, start and center stretch, space around space between, and space evenly. So for this thing, the structure will be dot container. We have display of a grid gap of 20 px, grid template column with repeat. Let me reduce this to 5 of 100 px, and let me add a border property of also solid with black color. And here, what should I do? We have a grid template rows with repeat 5 times of 100 px and justify item align item. So let me add the justify content property also. We have JC to start. Okay, start and enter stretch space around space evenly. Space between. So these are the 7 set of values for justify content. Now after justify content, let us check out for align content. And for align content property, let me reduce the structure. Okay. So for this thing, here the structure will contain display of a grid gap of 20 px, a height property. Let us add a height property of all. So let's say 2. 100px. And border property, we have grid template column with repeat 5 times 100px. Grid template row is not required currently. We have justify item, justify content, and align item. So let me add the align content property. We have AC align content to start and center, stretch, space around, space between, and space even. So these are again the 7 values of align content property. Now after this align content, let us see the next thing where what we are doing. We are actually overwriting the values what we have given to the entire set of items. So what we do, we see the justify self and align self property. Okay, so for the justify self property, okay, so what I do, dot container display of a grid cap of 20px, height of 500px, a border property, we have taken a grid template column with the repeat 5 times of 100px, align item. Now let me target the item number 7. Item 7. In the background, so orange, red. So this is item number 7. And here, let me apply the justify self to stretch your background is stretch only. Start, and center and stretch. So these are the 4 values of justify self. After justify self, let us check the align self. Now align self, align again on the column axis. So what we do, we need to add the row property also. So we have uncommenting the row property and align self to center, stretch, start. These are the 4 values of align self also. Okay. So here comes to an end of today's session. I hope you all have liked it. And please fill all the attendance form so that you will get the participant certificate by Sunday end of the